In recent years, Disney have discovered an incredibly successful and lucrative template for remaking their classic animations as live-action or photorealistic fantasy blockbusters. I personally enjoyed most of them to varying degrees, and with the latest release of The Lion King, I've decided to rank all 14 of them in order from my least to most favourite. I will be solely focusing on theatrical remakes, so I won't be including any of the low-budget, straight-to-home media or television movies, nor will I be including the recent Pete's Dragon or Mary Poppins Returns, which are reboots of predominantly live-action movies that I believe belong in a separate ranking, which I may tackle someday. Also, before people start asking where any of these movies are on my list, while they may be based on the same sources that original Disney animations were based on, these adaptations are not Disney movies and thus do not count in this ranking. And that, let's get into it. Kicking us off at number 14, 102 Dalmatians. Out of all of these movies, 102 Dalmatians is the one that I simply cannot find any logical justification for its existence. It's cheap, corny, and way over the top, taking all of the worst parts from 101 Dalmatians, which we will get to soon, and dialing them up to 100. Any redeeming qualities of the first are completely stripped back too, with even Glenn Close's portrayal of Cruella proving incredibly painful here. 102 Dalmatians shows very little respect to its original source and uses its premise sparingly as the setup for more rapid-fire, stupid, funny animal gags, frustratingly annoying characters, and an almost invisible plot. Remember those awful, cheaply made straight-to-home video animated sequels they used to make? Yeah, this is the live-action equivalent of those, except it was actually somehow released theatrically. 13. Alice in Wonderland. Not only is this a tremendous departure from the original Walt Disney animation, but it's also an enormous stain on Lewis Carroll's original source material. In fact, it's highly surprising to me that this was so successful that it set the precedent and catalyst for Disney's entire modern remake slate. This Alice isn't the bright, vibrant, and energetic tale that we all love, but a dark, dreary, and tiresome attempt at fantasy filmmaking through a Tim Burtonized lens. On paper, Burton doesn't seem a bad fit at all. In fact, his wacky style certainly lends itself quite well to the overall visual design, but in his efforts, he managed to suck out all of the life and colour present in the original animation. Performances here are pretty dreadful as well, and almost everyone is wildly miscast, particularly Mia Wasikowska, who can't manage to muster the energetic, childlike wonder of the animated Alice. 12. The Jungle Book, 1994. Commonly considered Disney's first live-action remake and originally advertised as such, Disney's first live-action stab at The Jungle Book isn't really a remake at all. There are no musical numbers or talking animals, and the story of the animation and Kipling's original novel are sidestepped altogether in favour of a story about Mowgli as a fully grown man. It works more so as an adaptation of Kipling's original sequel novels, but still a very loose one at that. There's nothing particularly Disney about this movie, likely because it was initially an independent production that Disney took over in order to capitalize. That said, it does have great production values, decent action sequences, and an enormously impressive cast. It works well as a lower grade, mummy-esque 90s action-adventure flick, however, not an overly exciting, entertaining, or interesting one at that. 11. Alice Through the Looking Glass. Surprisingly, I enjoyed this one slightly more than the first. It's more upbeat, quirky, and exciting, and though Johnny Depp's Mad Hatter was one of the most insufferable characters of the first, he actually works fairly well here, with some original material to chew on. Director James Bobbin manages to bring a new charm and vibrancy to this picture that was lacking in Burton's vision. And while, as a wholly original story, it does go off-source wildly, I feel the vision that Bobbin had for the movie is far more in line with Walt's original animation. That said, this still isn't a particularly good movie and doesn't get any better over time, but I do have to give full respect to the filmmakers for actually making this a serviceable tribute to the original animation, if nothing else. 10. The Sorcerers Apprentice. Nick Cage supposedly had a lifelong ambition to make a movie about wizards and magic, leading him to pitch an idea to Disney and producer Jerry Bruckheimer, the team behind the recently successful National Treasure movies. This idea took the 10-minute Sorcerers Apprentice segment from Fantasia starring Mickey Mouse and used it as a seed around which an entire world and mythos could be built. It was an incredibly interesting and unique idea and exemplifies the perfect way to build these remakes. Unfortunately, it's a template that Disney doesn't use that often. Sorcerer's Apprentice is a fairly entertaining and enjoyable fantasy adventure with fun characters, great set pieces, thrilling action sequences and visual effects, and its attempt to do something new with an established source is highly commendable. However, in its efforts, it tries to shove too much into such a short space of time, and it quickly becomes confusing, convoluted, and kind of awkward. With a better screenplay, it could have been a really good movie and perhaps a great potential franchise. 9. 101 Dalmatians. Disney's first mass-marketed remake kicks off with a wonderfully charming 90s rom-com feel that grips you right away with its delightful characters, genuine laughs, and engaging premise. However, the movie begins a rapid downward spiral around the halfway mark, transitioning from a lovable and enjoyable tribute to the original to a brainless, slapstick, funny animal movie. 101 is written by legendary screenwriter John Hughes, and it's almost as if he was simply tasked to take his Home Alone formula and write an animal version with very little effort. Jeff Daniels and Jolie Richardson are wonderful, and Glenn Close delivers a memorable performance as Cruella de Vil, single-handedly saving the movie from being unwatchable. Otherwise, the movie does offer some fun throwbacks to the original film and serves as some great 90s nostalgia today. And I'm especially glad that they didn't make the animals talk, such was a common trend in 90s kids movies, because I think that would have been absolutely disastrous. 8. Aladdin. On one hand, I really admire the way that this one stays so true to source while also making an effort to do something new, but the way in which it was adapted just didn't work for me. Aladdin feels like an extravagantly produced stage play with lifeless and lackluster performances, which I actually think comes down to the film's direction and not the actors. The musical numbers also don't work for me here. They feel forced, with the movie coming to a halt to make a show out of every single one of them instead of allowing them to flow seamlessly as in the animation. While numbers such as A Whole New World give me goosebumps in the original, I feel nothing here. I don't really care for any of the added songs, characters and subplots, or any of the newly added expansions. It all feels shoehorned for the sake of adding superfluous new stuff to an already jam-packed tight little narrative. The only saving grace in this movie for me is Will Smith. While I don't think he completely captured the spirit of the genie, I think he did a reasonable and enjoyable job. I really wish I could say I loved Aladdin, but I just can't. It left me wanting something more. 7. Maleficent. As an enormous fan of Walt's classic Sleeping Beauty, I really like Maleficent. It's enjoyable and gripping and beautifully shot and designed. It's not only a nice tribute to the source, but also puts a great new spin on it. In fact, while some of the divergences from Sleeping Beauty do bother me a little, I love and admire the film's willingness and bravery to reinvent and do something different. I'm a big advocate for these remakes, but I certainly enjoy them more if they don't just offer up the exact same movie on a live action platter. There's a lot in Maleficent that doesn't exactly work. Most of the acting is pretty corny, it has a slow narrative and a slightly long runtime, and thus can be tedious to trudge through. Regardless, I love the movie's fantasy elements and Jolie's performances, and overall I find it fairly enjoyable, if somewhat of a guilty pleasure. 6. Dumbo. Considering the original is merely an hour long, Tim Burton's Dumbo really only acts as a remake for half its length, with the second half expanding the story into a pseudo-sequel. While I really like the new direction, my main issue was that it continues to feel longer-winded and more overblown the more story and characters are bundled into it. There are some great moments, many of them new, but at 115 minutes they almost feel few and far between. Dumbo is beautifully directed and an absolute pleasure to look at. The original is one of Disney's darkest early efforts, and Burton's style really fits this one, unlike with Alice. I applaud the way that it dared to be different while staying respectful to the original source. However, with a few narrative issues, again, I can't say that I loved it. 5. The Jungle Book 2016. While featuring plenty of callbacks to the animation, this adaptation bends more towards Kipling's novel, working as a great reimagining of both versions. As a result, however, it struggles to figure out what it wants to be. One minute it's a dark drama avoiding the animation's musical template, then the next it's stopping in its track for a classic song. While fun, these moments feel inorganic, shoehorned and out of place, making the movie drag at times and feel narratively incoherent. Though it's arguable that Walt Disney would have liked this take, considering he was vehemently against the novel's dark tone, Jungle Book is exciting, gripping, and highly entertaining, with spectacular lifelike animation that makes it easy to forget that everything is CGI except for Mowgli. However, the efforts to make something fairly far removed from the animation while keeping its spirit alive are highly admirable. 4. The Lion King. Easily the safest of the bunch, making very little effort to be different. Songs, dialogue and story are all the same, with scarce minor tweaks, but therein lies its bravery. Where some remakes show bravery by taking completely new directions, Lion King shows bravery by staying on the same course despite audience expectations. All these elements are so inherent to the original movie. They are what made it so special, unique and iconic. These are things that simply cannot be changed, altered or removed majorly, or else this isn't The Lion King. Despite a few personal issues, I had an incredibly enjoyable time with it and adored the filmmaker's attempts to bring this story, which has been with me for 25 years since I was 3 years old, to new generations in new ways, utilizing incredible, groundbreaking techniques that had me in awe and wonder, experiencing a movie I've watched 100 times, almost as if for the first again. I may sound hypocritical considering what I've been saying about originality, but Lion King made me realize that there can be exceptions. Not everything needs to change, especially something that was so original and iconic to begin with, or it can lose what made it in the first place. 3. Christopher Robin. This is another one that isn't a traditional remake, but instead a live-action sequel of sorts to Walt Disney's original Pooh properties, while also offering a more adult-oriented take on the stories. It's touching, honest, funny, tear-inducing, and incredibly moving. Everything a good Winnie the Pooh story should be. That said, it's certainly not a perfect movie. It has a reasonably long runtime that tends to drag in parts and is quite dark and somber. I think it worked for the story, but also feel it should have been a touch brighter overall. Regardless, I deeply love Christopher Robin and find Ewan McGregor's casting to be one of the most delightful things to come from this lot of movies. 2. Beauty and the Beast. A gorgeous retelling with beautiful visual design, an overall sense of magic and enchantment, and fantastic character portrayals capturing the beauty and charm of the original in such a wonderfully respectful and emotional way. Though some have taken issue to Emma Watson's portrayal of Belle, I find her to be incredibly charming, and the supporting cast is equally as delightful. I love just about everything here, from the musical numbers which flow so beautifully and organically, to the newly added expansions, which work incredibly well and actually add to the story. Regardless of how much I adore this one, it doesn't take out my top space simply because it doesn't take many enormous risks, almost working as a play-by-play of the original. And coming in as my number one favourite live-action Disney remake, Cinderella. While Walt Disney's original Cinderella is an undeniable masterpiece, it's never been an absolute favourite. However, Kenneth Branagh's Shakespearean directorial style and design template lend themselves perfectly to this tale, creating easily the shiniest, most stunning and most eloquent film of the lot. Cinderella stays incredibly true and respectful to the source, offering the story we know and love, but also admirably pulls in new elements and expands the story in inventive, engaging and brave new ways. Just about everything about Cinderella is exquisite, from the costume set and visual design, hallmarked by vibrant saturated colours, to the classically inspired score and not so over-the-top performances. Branagh absolutely knows how to bring all the feels in the most stylish way possible, and make Cinderella as perfect a remake as can be. And at that, it's over to you guys out there. I want to know, what are your thoughts on the Disney live-action remakes? What are your favourites and what are your least favourites? Fire away in the comments below, but as always, please stay civil down there. Everyone will have their own different thoughts and opinions. If you want yours respected, please respect those of others. If this is your first time viewing one of my videos and you'd like to see more like it in the future, then please don't forget to hit that big old subscribe button up on your screen, as well as that like button down below for that little extra support. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.